What do you do for 2-3 hours? And who cares about the orgasm?
I'm Seema Anand. I'm a storyteller and a mythologist.
Hi, I'm Anvita Madan-Bahel and I'm a psychosexual therapist.
As you know, we get so many questions from people talking about how they seem to think almost of pleasure as something that they feel that they have to tick boxes around.
Go for it. And what questions do we have today?
How long should foreplay be, like kissing and stuff, for best orgasm? Okay, we're going to keep repeating this till this actually sinks in. But foreplay, kissing and stuff is not a chore. It's not something that you have to do because after that you can get to the real stuff, which is the penetrative sex. It's not. This is supposed to be the bit that actually brings your desire to such an excitement point, to such a passionate point, that when you come together in whichever way that is going to be, it is absolutely explosive. That will not happen with the penetration. That will only happen with the kissing and stuff or the foreplay. This is about pleasure. I know I've said this before. I know I keep repeating this with every answer that I give, but I think at some point this is going to sink in. Pleasure is about how you feel on the inside and what intrinsically makes you feel good.
Absolutely. And so the two things that come to my mind is, one, we've been sold that sex equals orgasm and therefore everything else seems irrelevant. But if we actually change that formula to believe that actually sex equals pleasure and it equals foreplay plus intimacy plus orgasm plus other things, that's more a holistic view on what sex is. And this, what we've been sold that sex equals orgasm, actually it would make sex so boring and so non-interesting if that was the equation. And it reminds me of an author who compared sex to going out for dinner and orgasm being the dessert. And he said, how many times do you go to a restaurant and say, oh, I just want dessert? You know, there's so much about the reason you go to a restaurant for a meal is because there's something about the ambience, it's something about who's around, what's happening, the hustle, the bustle, the meal, the starters, the main course. And so many times people would just say, oh, actually, I don't feel like the dessert. I'm stuffed, I've had enough and I'm going. And that's so true for sex. Like, if you didn't just look at sex as orgasm, you might actually think, oh, I'm stuffed. I've just loved every bit of foreplay. I've really enjoyed it and I'm exhausted from it. And who cares about the orgasm? And there are a lot of people who are happy with it and they don't focus on the orgasm actually.
So I have to say, I'm one of those people who often goes out for a meal and says, I just want dessert, or I'd happily start with that. But having said that, I remember in college, there was this girl with me who had a boyfriend and he had an open Jeep, and so they would go out and park somewhere and go through this whole idea of necking and so on. And she would describe to us in detail all of everything that they would have done. And she would always come back, however, and say, but हमने sex नहीं किया. You know, like, हम ठीक है, kissing कर ली, ये कर लिया, but हमने sex नहीं किया. So, yeah, I think that our idea for most people is that sex is about two parts of the body, one penetrating the other.
The bloody hymen was intact, right? That was the point.
Yeah, the bloody hymen. But yeah, like you said, if we could actually change this idea of sex to be other things. My favorite chapter in section 2 of the Kama Sutra, where they talk about the arts of pleasure, is where they talk about storytelling. So it says that before you have sex, what kind of conversation you should be having to get that excitement going. After you have sex, what kind of conversation you should be having so that the orgasm or that intimate moment that you had settles into a happy moment in your heart, because that's what makes it beautiful at the end. So it's not that little explosion of the so-called orgasm, but how you feel about it afterwards. That's what makes it an orgasm. And I love that idea. So before you have sex, by the way, just in case anybody is wondering, it's supposed to be gossipy or naughty stories. Apparently, if you gossip, that really brings down the inhibitions and gets you into each other. After sex, it's supposed to be beautiful, calm, happy stories about people being together and being happy together.
You know, we have to understand sex is a very intimate and act which has lots of inhibitions. You have to really bear all out. So how are you going to do that? And foreplay is helping you build on that. It's letting go, you know, one by one things leave. You stop worrying about how somebody's looking at you. Should I be shy? Should I not be shy? Should I have pleasure? It's just allowing you to open up. And that is so essential, because without which sex will be really painful. Physically and emotionally, it would be something that is painful. You should be thinking about it in some way, saying, how long can I actually have foreplay before orgasm? Like, I used to have a friend who used to come and say, we couldn't sleep last night because my boyfriend and I were at it for like 2-3 hours. And I used to think, what do you do for 2-3 hours? And obviously they were not having penetrative sex for 2-3 hours. It was the foreplay that continued for so long. And that's what makes it exciting. And just because I'm saying this, it doesn't mean this is now everybody needs to go and try sex for 2-3 hours. I'm just giving an example of something that was shared, and it sounded so exciting in some ways.
Yep, change the narrative to saying, oh, is the foreplay supposed to finish now? Can we not just carry on for a bit longer? Because that's what brings more pleasure.
And the better the foreplay, I can promise you, better the orgasm and the easier the orgasm. Notice it next time. If the foreplay isn't good, if you're not into it, if you've not really got into the foreplay, you won't be able to orgasm, or the orgasm will be really weak, you know. The intensity of it comes from the foreplay. So foreplay actually is the key. Like, you know, Seema and I just keep saying foreplay, 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 foreplay. Like, that's the secret to any good sex.
If you want to know a little bit more about that, do remember to check out my last video that I did with TTT Dobara and see whether you can get some help and advice from there.